You are tuned in to Stewart Spotlight Podcast live with your host, William Stewart Jr. with topics of everyday life. Tune in every Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. Today's guest, Pierre Hodges. Healthcare and higher education. So sit back, relax, and enjoy another episode. Now your host, William Stewart Jr. Good evening and welcome to Stewart Spotlight Podcast. My name is William Stewart Jr. and I am your host this evening. I hope everyone had a wonderful week and getting ready for the weekend because, the weekend go by so fast. At the blink of an eye, it's that Monday, time to go back to work. Today is Friday, July the 11th. This month is going by really, really fast, but we must catch up. But it's that time of the program, and I'm always asking for your assistance. So therefore, I need your assistance by doing this. I need your support. I need you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and make sure you turn on your notifications. So therefore, every time you hear this, you know that Stewart Spotlight Podcast is live. Yes, that's right. Make sure you turn on your devices. So therefore, every time you get the notification on your devices, such as your phone, cell phone, laptops, or computer, it's time to tune in to Stewart Spotlight Podcast. Let's talk about a few things that's happening this week. We want to extend our sincere condolences to those families of the Central Texas flooding. It is confirmed that 120 are dead and still over 150 are missing. And just this past week, Saturday, July the 5th, we had a massive flooding in North Carolina, as well as Tuesday, January the 8th, in New Mexico. Last week, I was approached by two individuals, a male and a female, and I'm not going to mention their names. They was asking about politics. And that's one of the subjects that I don't like to talk about on Stewart Spotlight is politics or religion, because it can get very heated. They are Trump lovers. I'm not disputing that at all. But they was wanted to come on the program to talk about the good things that Mr. Trump is doing. I'm open to that. Don't get me wrong. I'm open to having a discussion, dialogue of their opinion. And I do have a Democrat who is willing to come on as well. But we're looking for a conservative. Conservative, if you are interested, give us a call at 888-552-1944 so you can participate in this round table of this big, beautiful bill and have a little discussion, because I'm going to come up with 4 different topics so we can have a round table discussion. However, if it gets heated up, I will shut it down. Just FYI, this is a general conversation. So I'm waiting for this confirmation to let me know if they're willing to come on, and we can have a little dialogue about it. Let me see what else. Oh, my message for this week. I'm always coming up with a message for the week, and this is a good message. I refuse to go back to the old me. I'm becoming a better person using my past experience as lessons. Let that marinate a little bit. Understand that message for this week. My guest today is Pierre Hodges, a friend of mine who I worked with, and he has a story to tell of where he came from to where he's at today. So after this break, we're going to come back with my guest, Pierre Hodges. Stay tuned. Yes, welcome back to Stewart Spotlight Podcast. My name is William Stewart, as the host for the show. I'm not going to prolong this introduction any longer. As I stated before, I have a dear friend of mine. Welcome to the show, Pierre Hodges. Pierre, welcome. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you as well. How was your week?
Week was good. Busy but productive. No complaints.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we rocking and rolling and ready for this weekend.
Okay, I see you all slide down and slick to the side and all that stuff like that.
Doing what I do.
Oh, well, today the subject is healthcare and higher education. Pierre, I've known you for many of years. We used to work together at MXE. And once again, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to appear on Stewart Spotlight. But I just want to go back a little. You was raised on the west side of Chicago, correct?
I was.
What part?
Well, I was raised around Kedzie and Flournoy. So yeah.
Okay. Now,
Heart of the West Side.
The heart of the west side, huh? So now tell us a little bit about your family. How many siblings you have?
So I have 6, me being number 7, so I'm the oldest.
So
3 boys, 3 girls.
Also, were you the bully of the family, or?
No, not at all. I was never the bully. I was more the bullied than the bullier.
Okay.
So no, I wasn't the bully. I most definitely wasn't a bully to my siblings.
Okay. Did you set good footprints for them to follow?
Maybe I did, and unintentionally. My journey, as we discussed a little bit later on, may not always have been the ordered footprints that I may have felt were, something that someone might want to follow, but they were still my footprints as a whole. So I own them,
Okay.
but, I do think in the end, where my footprints have landed, most definitely have laid out a blueprint for, I think, what anybody could potentially follow as relates to just what may be considered, ideal for someone to follow.
So basically, you were a good role model for your siblings,
I think so.
as being the oldest.
I think so. I
Okay.
mean, I most definitely, I raised some of them. I always tried to, do the right thing, whether that was doing the right thing related to something, religious, or doing the right thing as it related to something civil.
Okay.
I always tried to make the best decisions.
Okay. What about your parents?
So I was raised by, well, actually, I was raised by my grandmother. My mom and my dad had me very young. My mom was 15, my dad was 16. So, ultimately, me and my mom pretty much grew up like siblings, but ultimately, I became a grandma's baby. So I most definitely was raised by my grandmother.
Okay.
Shouts out to the grandmas.
So did you have any role models as you were growing up?
Probably unknowingly. I think that for me, my biggest exposure came from what might emulate a role model was probably when I got in elementary school. Some of my, teachers, specifically one that comes to mind is Miss Kathleen Butler. She was one of my teachers that was like a drama coach to me, and she was very instrumental in just kind of sparking something in me that kind of let me knew that I was a little different. and that I had something brewing.
Okay.
So I would say for elementary school, her, and then of course once I got to high school, I kind of gotten a little bit more broader exposure to other different types of, teachers and, advisors. And but majority of my role models pretty much came from, me being in school.
Now, so as you were growing up in school, did you have any career plans or goals that you wanted to be when you become older?
No,
You didn't have
no,
no
the
goals?
goal was just to finish. The goal was just to finish. Um, I really didn't come from a family of academics or
Okay.
academia. My family was pretty much based on getting a good job. A lot of my, aunts and uncles worked at companies where they had been there for years back in the old school days of,
Hmm.
getting a job straight out of high school and staying there until you can retire. So, education wasn't really something that was on the forefront for me, especially being that my grandmother only had an eighth grade, education level coming from Grenada, Mississippi. So, education wasn't really something that she pushed as
Hmm.
relates to, mapping your life out around that.
Hmm.
But ultimately, I think that looking back, one of my unknown talents was acting. I was really into the arts very heavily. Um, and so, that was one of the things that I think people kind of had their eye on me for is that, I did a lot of, plays, I did a lot of playwriting, did a lot of community stuff in the neighborhood. So, I think that ultimately, if there was something that was kind of out there for me to look towards as relates to, a goal, as relates to a career path, it probably was that.
Oh, okay. Wow. Now, you mentioned your mother was from where in Mississippi?
My grandmother was from Grenada, Mississippi.
Oh, okay. I want to know how far that was from Black Hawk because my mother was raised in well, she was born in Black Hawk, Mississippi. But anyway.
Yeah.
So now you finished high school.
Yes.
What was your
Thank
career?
God.
What was your
Thank
career?
God.
Thank God. You got the diploma. Okay, let's move on.
I got my diploma. Basically after I got out of high school, for me, I think the thing was that's when I kind of really started trying to figure out what was I going to do. And I think that ultimately it did not come, straight after high school. For me, finishing high school was pretty much me kind of mirroring, other students and friends around me who were going off to college and doing those different type of things. And so one of my initial pursuits was Jackson State University in Mississippi, because we have family down there, but unfortunately, I really didn't have the support
Mm,
to be able to follow through that. And then locally, I was like, well, being that I still have a passion for the arts, I'll try Columbia. They had some scholarships
mm,
that they were offering, but even with that, I just couldn't get my momentum. And because things were really unstable for me at that time, I really couldn't focus on really what I wanted to do as relates to school. And so, unfortunately, at that time, that didn't pan out for me.
so you picked another career path. You went into hairstylist.
Yes. So a few years later, my cousin, he was a hairstylist for years, and I
Okay.
always admired him, always admired the artistry of it. And he more so did hair in the hood,
Hmm.
and I just love that environment. I love going to those shops and, just being exposed to all the different personalities and everything that went along with being in that environment. And so when I moved to Minnesota in the early 90s, um, I decided I'm just going to go ahead and try this, but I knew I wanted to do a little bit of a different type of hair. I didn't really have the patience or probably even the skill to really do all those intricate styles that were very popular back in the early 90s. And so I enrolled in, the Aveda Institute, which is one of the top hair leading companies actually in the world.
Mm.
And so I got accepted and kind of worked through finding the new skilled talent that was hidden in me and actually did very well there.
Okay. Now, how long did you do that for?
Well, once I graduated from Aveda in 1994. And immediately after graduating from Aveda, I actually worked with them as a what they call a highly textured hair consultant, which is basically black hair.
Hmm.
And so basically what I did was I went around and I was a hair educator where I would train other stylists who worked at the Aveda salons how to do black people's hair.
Really?
And so, I did that for a few years and then ultimately made some connections with some friends back in Chicago. One of my good friends, Tracy Crosby, who was a stylist at that time, she was also assisting Andre Walker. who of course is known for doing Oprah's hair at Harpo Studios. And so she eventually, moved over into another salon, and she kind of connected me in that arena to be able to make that connection. And so ultimately I kind of assisted between, you know, um, him and other stylists at the salon that he worked at.
Hmm.
And so that kind of exposed me to more higher end clients. And then from there, I left there and I went to, other salons in the downtown area and really worked on, a multitude of different working class women, but also, I had some, high end clients as well. I did Diane Burns here. I used to work for Channel 7
Channel
News.
7,
Desiree
right?
Rogers was another regular client of mine. I most definitely had Karen Calabrese, who had a big popular vegan restaurant in the near north side of Chicago. So I most definitely worked with some higher end clients during that time. It was a good
Wow.
time.
So was it a good pay at that time?
I think it was. I think I was doing well to be in my mid to late 20s and, doing hair, but I
Hmm.
did always have a concern in the back of my mind how stable this was going to be.
Hmm.
I really wasn't sure if I wanted to go into salon ownership, which would have been the next tier.
Hmm.
Of course, you could always go down the path of celebrity stylist or something like that, but really didn't know. I think I felt ultimately that I wanted to do something that was more practical and more stable because I knew I wasn't going to be standing up doing hair
Hmm.
forever.
So therefore you became a hairstylist. Is that the proper term for it?
Hmm.
Okay, hairstylist.
Cosmetologist.
And you did that for so many years. And then you said you saw a program and you wanted to enroll. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, initially, the program that I saw was not the program that I landed. The initial
All right.
program that I had an interest in was the radiography program at Malcolm X College.
Hmm.
I had a friend who had a friend, Miss Kenyon Douglas, who worked at Malcolm X College as an advisor. And
Hmm.
so, when I would meet sometimes with her outside related nothing to work or her school, I would ask her different questions. And I think she could kind of see that I was becoming more intrigued. And so I told her that I was interested in the radiography program, and she had me come up to the school and do a placement test.
Hmm.
This was all new to me. I really didn't have any awareness of or any kind of background experience toward what pursuing college even looked like, even at the community college level, outside of filling out an application. And so, I enrolled and started taking classes, and then it just kind of took its momentum from there. And so after about 2 years, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get into the radiography program because there was a waiting
Wait,
list.
yes.
And so I was not going to sit out another year. I just didn't have the momentum to do that. And so I saw the surgical technology program, and I really didn't really know what that was at that time. But I went and applied, and the program director, she had one seat available, and I got into that program, and it kind of took off from there.
So give us an example. What is a surgical technician,
Technologist.
technologist?
So a surgical technologist is someone who works specifically in the operating room surgical services arena.
Hmm.
They have multiple functions as relates to what their scopes of work are. One is their main focus is to ensure and maintain sterility while cases are being performed by the surgeon to ensure that infections and other different type of things that could happen as relates to pathogens and bacteria being exposed to patients are avoided. They are also responsible for um, assisting surgeons with passing instruments, positioning patients, mixing and measuring medications, um, a multitude of things.
So
There,
basically,
some of
this
the
is this is all in the operation room.
yes, while the procedures are going on, they can
Okay.
pretty much do anything that the surgeon directs them to do because we work under the direct supervision of surgeons.
I did a little statistic. I put some statistics up, and it says, according to the United States Bureau of Labor and Statistics, the needs of surgical technicians are expected to increase by 5% between now and 2032, which is slightly higher, faster than the national average of all occupations due to the population of growing older. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Well, I can. I think you have to look at it from the standpoint of looking at the history and the evolution of surgical technologists. Surgical technologists kind of branded off from nurses
Mm-hmm.
back in the early 70s. We most definitely were created in the military. And, before we kind of grew into this big organization slash association that we are, and working formally under the auspice of nurses, one of the things you have to keep in mind is that a lot of people who worked for many years in surgery are now older. And so, people unfortunately aren't getting any healthier. We're more aware,
Right.
but are we getting more healthier? And so what that causes is that causes a ripple effect of what we call, you know, a market demand. Now, nursing as a whole, there's been a shortage, for nursing for years. But now I think that because surgical technology is becoming more commercial and more people are becoming more aware of what they are,
Hmm.
and because there are more procedures that are needing to be done, and because now we have other outlets other than main hospitals, we now have private practices. We have, outpatient centers, surgery centers, ambulatory centers that can do faster procedures and send patients home a lot quicker without hospital stays. I think this has created more of a demand. And you have to remember when COVID happened, all surgical procedures were canceled. The only procedures that were available were, life-threatening procedures. And so you had a lot of surgical technologies that weren't working. So a
Wow.
lot of them during that time, either retired or did other things like went back to school, maybe went back to nursing school or chose completely new career paths altogether.
Okay.
And so ultimately, when that ban was lifted, there was a shortage because you had all this influx of patients who needed procedures done and not enough staff to be able to accommodate those procedures. And so it just really opened up the market. And so
Wow.
I think that's why the trajectory of our career field is showing that margin of growth
Right.
because, you know, in the next 10 years, right? A lot of people that are working right now who are in their 50s will be retiring because they'll be in their 60s. And hopefully there's no one in the operating room working as a surgical technologist really past their 60s. But hey, the struggle's real and I get
Yeah,
it.
shaking head, giving this instrument.
Okay? That
so,
part.
so let's talk about go back a little bit. Now, you were smart enough to get that extra seat in that class. So was that class difficult to
Almost definitely.
really?
Surgical, I have a few degrees now,
Hmm.
and the surgical technology program will still be one of the hardest programs that I ever experienced as it relates to formal training and learning.
Okay. So now you have completed the course. You got your associate degree. What was your next step?
Well, from there, it was time to find a job.
Hmm.
And so ultimately, I kind of made the decision that I didn't want to look for a job in the Chicagoland area. I wanted to go south. And so my first job was actually in Grady Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia, which is a
Hmm.
level one trauma center. And that was very instrumental in just introducing me to the broader field of what surgical technologists do and just how vital and instrumental we really can be in the operating room.
Okay.
Working at Grady, I saw a plethora of different procedures, all types of emergent procedures, people coming in with all these crazy situations as relates to things that you would wonder, how could this person even still be alive, right? People with their heads hanging off, or people with one arm, or people, just all kind of crazy stuff. But it really kind of, it gave me an opportunity to really be able to internalize, not just what we do, but also how important we are.
Mm.
And, after being there for 3 years, I then transitioned over to Piedmont Hospital, which is another hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a different aura being at Piedmont because, of course, Piedmont is a private hospital. So I got exposed to kind of a different type of procedures that maybe weren't as traumatic as the procedures that I was seeing at Grady.
Mhm.
So it then gave me that flexibility and that exposure to see the different types of procedures. And it also taught me about, just hospitals as a whole and how private hospitals different from community hospitals, how community hospitals differ from religious hospitals, how religious hospitals differ from teaching hospitals,
Mm.
because Grady was both. Grady was a teaching hospital and it was a community hospital. So it most definitely put me on a path I think that kind of unconsciously gave me a segue into being able to teach.
So, I guess you would have to have the stomach to work in the emergency room or in surgery because me, myself, I've been passed out on the floor by seeing something as you stated. I couldn't take it.
Hmm.
But now
Exactly.
right, you went from, you received your associate degree, then you transitioned over to Atlanta, Georgia to Grady, then you
Hmm.
transferred from Grady to Piedmont.
Hmm.
And what brought you back to Chicago?
Well, I got a phone call. I got a phone call from our former program director, Marietta McDuffie, who was the program director at that time.
Hmm.
And she was looking for a lab coordinator.
Hmm.
And she asked me, was I interested? And, I was just like, wow, the fact that she even considered me as someone, the boy from the hood, from the West Side, who
Right.
was just happy to just finish the program with an associate's degree, and had some sense of direction. I was just really flattered that she felt that was something I was even capable of.
Mm.
And so I took her up on her offer and I, moved back to Chicago, and my alma mater became my new employer. And so I was working at Malcolm X College as a lab coordinator for the surgical technology program. And then it just kind of started scaffolding from there.
Wow. So I'm sure that you had some very interesting role models at Malcolm X College because I believe Malcolm X College is a beacon college for the health sciences. They can birth you and bury you, everything in between, correct?
That is very true. That was a slogan.
Yeah, I used to
That
work
was
there.
a slogan. Yeah, it did.
So,
And being that you mentioned any role models there, I think that it probably transitioned probably more from role models to mentors.
mm,
There were several colleagues that I, build up relationships and rapport with that most definitely transition into mentorship. Starting even with you, you were our, chapter chair for our union at the time. And you were most definitely in the trenches, working very hard for us as faculty and staff there at the college. And I was most definitely privy to a lot of different things that I would see you do and the different meetings that you would have and the different grievances and challenges that you had to work through. So that started kind of giving me a sense of just problem solving or just being a critical thinker. There was another person, Luke Ellie, who was my department chair. He was also very instrumental. He took me under his wing, very smart, very, very aware, educated man. And I learned a lot from him as relates just kind of managerial styles as relates to coordination, as relates to just dealing with students. Of course, I had Dr. Ronald Gramet, who was the director of the pharmacy tech program. He was most definitely very instrumental with learning a lot of things as relates to just, being a man as a Black professional, and standing your ground, saying what you mean, meaning what you say, but you better make sure that it's the right thing and that it makes sense.
right.
And he was also very instrumental. And then, of course, there was Dr. Micah Young, who was our dean for a short period of time. He was the one who actually gave me the opportunity to ultimately become an administrator. Him and, of course, Dr. Anthony Monroe, who was our campus president. They both, saw something in me where they felt I was ready for leadership. And so, just to go back without jumping too much ahead, that was pretty much where I think looking back now, I would say a lot of my mentorship happened at Malcolm X College.
Well, I can concur because there was a lot of role models when I was there as well. And I want to piggyback on what you said because Ron Grimet was my mentor. I've learned so much from Ron because Ron has that memory like goes way back. I
An
said,
elephant.
right. He said, well, how did you remember that? But anyway, uh, stay with me for a moment and we're going to come back and talk about your career path. Once you reach that peak, you start, okay, let me go to the next level in my education. Uh, we'll be right back after this break. Hi, my name is William Stewart Jr. I'm the host of Stewart Spotlight Podcast. How would you like to be a guest on my show? If you have gone through something, came out of something, and just want to share it, We would love for you to be a guest to discuss any topic related to your situation. Your insight of experience, wisdom, knowledge would be valuable to our viewers. Who knows? By sharing could help someone who may gone through what you came out of. Sharing is caring. So give us a call, 888-552-1944, so we can schedule you on the next Stewart Spotlight podcast. And we're back with my guest, Pierre Hodges, Healthcare to Higher Education. We just spoke about the different role models and the different levels. So now you have reached that level. Were you thinking, okay, I need to go to the next level? What was that next level? Because I believe you have to go back to school.
I had to go back to school and then go back to school again. So, when Meredith McDuffie did offer me the role, I then, of course, had to go back to school and obtain, my bachelor's degree, So that was in itself what I felt was something that I never thought would be something that I would be exposed to, because I thought the associate's degree in itself was most definitely enough, right, for me to feel like, I pretty much have done something where now I feel like I'm able to, work and I have a credential that can make me marketable. But, I ultimately did go to college again and pursue my Bachelor's of Science in Healthcare Management. And then from there, my program director decided that she wanted to do an early retirement and she wanted me to be her successor for the program, but that involved me having to go back to school again and obtain a master's degree. And I toured with that. But ultimately, after just doing more research and getting some feedback from some other colleagues who had also completed that program at the same institution, I went and applied. And unknowingly to me, I didn't even know that I was applying for a dual master's program at that time. And so, upon completion of that program, 21 months later, I completed it with a master's in education of adult learning and a master's in education for curriculum development and design. So it's like, who would have thunk that, someone like me, not to be cliche, but, would be at this level now where I have 3 degrees, and, now I'm in this position.
So now, did you apply for the position and get the position?
I did. Dr. Anthony Monroe and Dr. Micah Young, they proposed a position to me, and it was pretty much cut and dry, and then the next thing I knew, I was the director of medical programs.
So how challenging was that when you?
Very challenging. I was younger.
Okay.
I was a lot more inexperienced. And it was trial by error and trial by fire, because around that time when I did become program director of medical programs, the program was actually up for its reaccreditation from our accreditor. And so, that was grassroots for me. So it was pretty much setting the foundation for me to learn. And so I had a lot of support. There was a lot of collaboration with me and, the district officials that were assigned to help me. And so we got through it. And I learned a lot about myself. But most importantly, I learned a lot about the program and that process of, higher level leadership.
So now you got your feet wet at Malcolm X College as the program director. And then you were offered another position at somewhere else.
I was, it's like once I updated my LinkedIn account
Right.
with new credentials and new titles, it's like the floodgate opened, and then just started getting all these different emails and phone calls from different other recruiters and other program directors and other campus presidents and other hospitals. And, for a while, after being a Malcolm X for 9 years and pretty much going through every tier and every level of, what my program enabled me to do professionally, I felt like, okay, maybe it's time for me to branch out, and, do some other things. And so, I ultimately moved, and that kind of started my nomadism, my professional nomadism, into just going all across the country and working with specific schools or specific hospitals or specific entities. And I was just picking up all these various skills. And I kind of, over time, became known for really being good at doing specific things, whether it was working with accreditation,
Hmm.
whether it was working with policies and processes, whether it was working with curriculum development and design.
Okay, so now you went from the Northwest to the West Coast to the East
So I
Coast,
went from the Midwest
Midwest to
to the
North,
South, from the
then
South
back to
to the
West.
East, from the East to the West,
A gypsy,
then
just put it
from,
like that, a gypsy.
yeah, gypsy, gypsy,
Okay.
gypsy, gypsy.
So now, after all this experience and knowledge that you gained up under your belt, and what was the most favorable place you really enjoy working?
I would say it was probably two. I would probably say Atlanta was very, very advantageous for me. I built up some really good relationships while working down there. A lot of the colleagues that I work with, I'm still good friends with now.
Mm-hmm.
I also enjoy working in San Diego. San Diego and LA was fun.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for an institution there. That was a big institution. They had multiple campuses across the country. And I enjoyed living in San Diego. So I would say Atlanta for the collegialism and the relationships that I built. And I would say San Diego / LA for the scenic aspects of what the West Coast provided. But I also enjoy working for that institution as well.
Now, you were part of the administration at several different facilities.
Yes.
Um, what was the most challenging policy you had to put in place?
I think that for my specific department, I think that one of the most specific and kind of challenging policies and process that I had to implement was really from the standpoint of making staff and faculty more accountable. A lot of times when students are at clinicals, a lot of times we have identified clinical instructors who are able to go out and check on those students. But it's really a faith process where you are just trusting that those instructors are going to do their due diligence by making sure that they're there when they're supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
making sure they're on time when they're supposed to be. And unfortunately, a lot of times I found that, I would get calls or emails or just by chance happen to be in a meeting with someone from their facility. And, they would state that, hey, we haven't seen anyone from your institution,
Mm.
for months, and
Wow.
whatever. And so I kind of noticed a trend. So one of the things that I made sure I wanted to do was implement a process where, clinical instructor staff or clinical instructor faculty could be more accountable for their time. And that didn't go over well with a lot of, places and with a lot of, instructors that were under my leadership because they felt like, I was either accusing them of not doing their jobs or that I didn't trust them. And so, I got pushback with that a lot. So that was one of the key examples I would say I had a hard time really kind of getting implemented and really allowing the team to really trust the process.
So now, which college you became the dean? Because you
So
finally,
that was in
finally,
Florida.
finally made the dean.
Yes, the academic dean. And that was in Florida. That was for an institution called Nuke University.
Okay.
Nuke University is the largest um, university system in San Juan, Puerto Rico, but they had satellite campuses
Okay.
in Florida. And so I was the academic dean for one of their campuses in DeLand, Florida, which is right outside of Orlando. I most definitely got exposed to a different level of leadership. Now, the flip side to that is it was a proprietary institution because I most definitely had experiences with traditional colleges or universities and also with proprietary. So being a dean at a proprietary college is a little bit of a different gamut than it is in traditional institutions. But yes, I became a dean all the same.
So did you enjoy it, becoming a dean?
No, I didn't
Oh,
actually.
really?
I didn't. No, I didn't.
Oh, wow.
I don't think it was the situation. I didn't enjoy the aspect of the title,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't enjoy pretty much probably the way the institution, navigated the way in which the deans were supposed to do specific duties.
It's okay.
So unfortunately, I couldn't really, embellish in that role because it was very stressful. And so, to be completely transparent, I think that the learning experience that I took away from that was that it's not the position of being a dean that was an issue for me. I think it was just that that institution and the way that they navigated and it had this unrealistic expectations for their deans,
Okay.
is what I think made that position not be as, enjoyable as it could have been.
So now, right now, you're located in Maryland, I believe. And
Correct.
what is your position there?
So I'm here now with Montgomery College, and I am the program director for the surgical technology program here. And I also just implemented this summer a sterile processing program because sterile processing, of course, is adjacent to surgical technology because sterile processing is a program that enables people to create, sterilize, and disinfect the actual instruments and supplies that we use for surgery.
Hmm.
And it's another allied health profession that's a good entry level aspect of being able to get into allied health. It pays very well. And so, we started that program this summer and it's taken off. And yeah, so that's my role.
Now, there's different levels in surgical tech. Is it surgical technology, surgical tech? Give us a breakdown of those three different tiers.
So there is surgical technology, the profession.
Okay.
There is surgical technologist, the person. And then there is a surgical assistant, which is the next level of what a surgical technologist can become, which is someone who can work directly with surgeons and actually do the surgical procedures with the surgeon. So a surgical assistant is not just assisting the surgeon with ancillary items and duties, they're actually performing the surgeries with the surgeons.
Wow. So what's an entry level of pay for those positions?
Well, it's going to vary based on where you live.
Right. Obvious.
Regions, of course, demographics, of course. Some of the more higher paying areas are going to be the West Coast,
Hmm.
the East Coast. Some of your lower paying areas are probably going to be places like Florida, more rural areas, probably like Wichita, Kansas, St. Louis. But places like Illinois, Chicago pay very well. Texas pays very well. Dallas pays very well. So Washington State pays very well. Peoria pays very well. And when you say pays very well, just to kind of give someone a footprint of what that looks like from an hourly rate, the rates can go anywhere from $30 to $60, $70 an hour. And also, surgical technologists have the option, like nurses, to work registry or an agency, where they don't have to be somewhere full time. They can just go work, for a specific amount of time based on whatever that hospital's needs are. And those agencies pay top rate. They pay for your housing. They pay for your travel. They pay for your food. You get stipends. So there's a lot of different avenues for someone in surgical technology.
You know, that sounds good. Don't get me wrong, but I'm assuming that class is extremely hard.
It can be. And not only is the class extremely hard, our licensure certification exam is very hard. I've had people who were surgical technologists and then became nurses, and some of them say they felt like the certification exam for surgical technologists exam was harder than the NCLEX. So, it most definitely, because you basically have to know the fundamental things that a surgeon knows
Hmm.
without maybe all the excessive training, but you most definitely have to be in tandem with him. You have to know anatomy.
Hmm.
You have to know the difference between a vein and an artery. You have to know the difference between the colon and the small intestine. You have to know so many aspects. There's a pharmacology aspect that you have to know. You have to know medications. You have to know the metric system. There's a lot of different things that you have to
Wow.
know.
Well, my hat goes off to you on that one now, because I failed that test a long time ago. So, Pierre, let's talk about because I know you love to travel. I've seen several posts on Facebook where you travel with family, friends, and just having a good old time. So,
Mhm.
is that your relaxing moment, just to get away from it all and just relax?
Well, that's the intent, right? But it never ever works out like that. Any vacation or trip that I've ever taken that was supposed to be relaxing rarely has become that because the people that I go with always want to go and do these different things and I always come back home tired. So whether that's somewhere that's urban, somewhere that's rural, or somewhere that's tropical.
Okay.
But yes, I most definitely do have an appreciation for travel. I'm really starting to open up my horizons more to being more diversified with the different places that I want to go and that, I'd like to see in the future. Some of those trips will now involve me potentially having to fly over the Atlantic Ocean, or maybe even the Pacific Ocean,
Hmm.
or maybe even the Indian Ocean, right? So I think that, I kind of want to break the monotony of a lot of different places that I'm familiar with because I love going to places that I know what I'm going to get. But I think in the near future, there are some other places that I want to go. I want to go to Paris. I want to go to, France. I ultimately want to go to Spain. I most definitely, before I do anything, want to go back to the motherland. I most definitely want to go to Africa. I've heard great things about Johannesburg, Cape Town, maybe even Nigeria, right? So I can get a better understanding of Nigerian culture since we have so many here. Um, so I think that for me, I'm very excited about that aspect of being able to just learn, especially too, because I've been exposed to so many different students who come from so many different diversified backgrounds. And so that'll also give me an opportunity to maybe even, connect with my students a little bit more because I'll have that exposure to what their actual, origins are as relates to where they come from.
Wow. I would love to go to Africa. I just want to see the safari, an animal, a lion, chasing something and
Yeah,
capturing, and then I can get back on the plane and come back home. I'm
exactly.
fine with that. Now, what? How do you relax? How do you just totally relax?
That's still a work in progress for me because I'm still shaking off being a workaholic. I think that because I'm so passionate and committed to the aspect of adult learners and
Hmm.
the opportunities that adult learning can provide, I still have the energy and enthusiasm as if I was just, coming into this career 20 years ago. I think that ultimately, as I've gotten older, though, whether it's my mind, my body, or my spirit, whether I want to or not, I'm kind of being forced to slow down now, right? I want to make sure that, my health is up to par,
Right.
that my mental capacity is safeguarded, and that my spiritual realm is coveted. And so, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, I am working now to being more aware of just what gives me peace, what keeps me calm, and what gives me serenity. And realistically and honestly, a lot of that really involves me being in my house. I am an extroverted introvert. I can be very sociable, but I also love my space. I love just being able to be home and relax. I love watching documentaries and history channels and sci-fi and anything related to science. And I can just watch that all day.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I think that realistically, me just answering that question now, I mean, I'm having to force myself to think about it. I think that what's relaxing for me is just kind of when I'm in my own space.
Okay.
Because when I'm around other people that we're trying to relax, William, it never really happens.
I could imagine that. So, where do you see yourself 5, 10 years from now?
Hopefully alive, that's first, and healthy, that's second.
Second. Okay.
I don't really live my life in the 5 to 10 year space anymore. I kind of am at a place now where I don't really feel like I have anything else to prove per se as relates to goals.
Hmm.
I think that I most definitely have beat the odds.
Hmm.
I most definitely think that unknowingly to me, I have achieved and overcome a lot of obstacles and different other challenges to where I'm grateful for where I am.
Hmm.
I'm settled as relates to my mind and my spirit in regards to the chase. I've overcome the false perception and propaganda and bureaucracy of the career ladder and working in this administration now. I think that my biggest plan is to just try and keep myself as healthy and employed and manage my finances as much as I possibly can with that I have control over
Hmm.
and be realistic and be observant. And so I think for me, because the future is so undecided right now with just where we are as a country, for me to just sit here and say where I think I would want to be in 5 to 10 years would really be me just reaching for the stars because I don't even know what this country, what this world is going to
Yeah,
look like
yeah,
in the next
that
next
that was
10
the
years.
under. I'm I'm sorry about that. I just realized what I said when I said it, and then think about where we at. That just went over my head. Sorry about that.
Yeah, kind of even ties into some of your topics, right?
Right.
With your opening
Now,
topics.
I was told by a little birdie you like to go to Puerto Rico.
I do. I do. Puerto Rico is one of my favorite spots.
Uh-huh.
Puerto Rico, I think, gives you the best of all things that I enjoy. I
Hmm.
love tropical environments, so you get that beach environment. I also love, because I can only sit on the beach for so long. I'm like, okay, I'm over it. I'm getting sunburned. What do we need to do? What are we going to do? But, Puerto Rico also gives you that urban culture,
Hmm.
gives you that city vibe. The Condado area is one of my favorites. O San Juan is another one of my favorites. Beautiful people, good energy, good rum. So it's never a dull moment, in Puerto Rico. One of
Wow.
my faves.
Wow. Perfect. Well, Pierre, I applaud you. I applaud you for where you came from to where you at now. And I've seen all those
Thank you.
things in between where you went through. And that's truly a blessing. Because I'm almost surely you would have never thought that where you came from to where you at now. And
No.
that could encourage many people who may be listening to this viewer to this program. So give us your last words of encouragement.
I think that, my last words of encouragement would probably come from encouraging myself
Hmm.
to, enabling that to bounce off to someone else through the TV screen. I think that first and foremost, someone has to be very intentional with their actions. They also have to be accountable, for what their processes are as relates to the things that they're doing, the decisions that they're making, the research, the time, and sometimes even the money that may be required to invest in ourselves. I think that, for myself personally, having a strong spiritual foundation is key. Having a support system is always vital because the reality is, regardless of what people say, you can't do it by yourself. And most importantly, staying focused. And as long as someone is able-bodied and will-spirited and able to navigate through the different processes that is required, it can be done. I'm not one of those people that feel like you can do anything you want to do. I do think that's a overrated statement, but I do think you can most definitely find a focal point and identify something that you can be good at or potentially even great at and invest in it and whatever that investment looks like for you. And so that's pretty much the path that I've taken, knowingly and unknowingly. A lot of the different places that I've been and positions I've been in were not things that came to me because I mapped them out and that's what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting to be here.
Hmm.
So you just have to be open to what I consider to be the universe, which is God for me, Jesus for anybody that wonders what the universe represents. But you just have to be open. You
Right.
have to be ready and you have to be prepared.
Absolutely. Pierre, I applaud you. I want you to continue doing the very best you can. And when you become a president of a college, I need a job.
Gotcha. You'll be the first one I'll call. You'll be
Pierre
the first one
Hodges,
I'll call.
I want to thank you for coming on the show. Feel free to come back anytime. Thank you.
No problem.
Have a nice weekend. All right.
You
All
too.
right. Bye.
Take care.
That was Pierre Hodges. I really appreciate. I've known Pierre back in the days, and uh, I'm really I'm really proud of him from where he came from to where he's at right now, and all the things in between he has accomplished in his life, and he's continuing to accomplish many and bigger things. Uh, about to give you my Bible verse today before we end this program. Um, comes from Proverbs 1 and 5. A wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall obtain wise unto a wise counsel. Take a look at that. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed this episode this evening. I hope it touched you in many different ways of how to motivate and you know encourage others to thrive for the best. Until we meet again next week, I want everybody to have a safe and wonderful weekend. God bless.